The persona of nationalism from the SNP has been removed in its entirety in recent years as the promotion of internationalism takes its place. The promotion of global citizenship, sustainability and so on. The undermining of our heritage and our identity on a daily basis, with the propaganda that anybody who resides here is just as Scottish as the descendants of ethnic and or native Scots. The promotion of diversity, multiculturalism and inclusion. All may appear as forces for moral goods, but there's always an ulterior motive. There's always an agenda. The rise of automation, the rise of AI, and the once essential requirement to supposedly reduce our carbon footprints seemingly matters that can be just glossed over now, or more importantly just forgotten about in their entirety when they decide to put the feelers out for mass migration. And it's undeniably obvious that this is the long-term outcome of what's been proposed here. All this talk of immigration comes after the refugee crisis, which turned to the migrant crisis, which saw the premeditated migrant and refugee compacts being signed, which consequently saw the legalization of transportation of economic migrants to Europe under the guise of the initial rescue narrative that came from the days of old when it was still referred to as a refugee crisis. It's been throughout these years that immigration has repeatedly been conflated with asylum seekers and refugees, and all three of the aforementioned have been repeatedly conflated with the one and only solution to our aging population problems. Deception and conflations, part and parcel of politics these days, and the Scottish Government are no different. When they speak about requiring control over their borders and having their own immigration policies, it's always dressed up to appear as though it's European immigration that they're referring to, as they refer to the contributions that past European migrants to Scotland have made without actually referencing the fact that they're European, implying it though with the regular references to freedom movements. Although it may well be true to a degree that European immigration is something that they'd welcome, it's worth noting that about 90% of their pro-migration discussions and speeches always seem to leave out migration from Africa and the Middle East, which is odd when you consider the fact that those demographics come from the exact same migration flows and pool of talent, you could say, that currently the Scottish Government are unable to encourage, attract, nor accept without devolved immigration powers. So to grant them the right to control who comes into the country, to grant them their devolved powers, to grant them what they want, will allow the SNP or the Scottish Government in general to go further afield, to entice whoever it is they want to see here. The Scottish Government are no different to the majority of Western governments when it comes to this. They've deliberately remained silent on the matters at hand, well aware of the issues that we face. In fact, for at least 20 years they've been well aware. So why was nothing done 20 years ago? 15? What about 10 or 5? Why has nothing been done now? And isn't it funny that their solution to the failures, their failures I may say, is mass migration, the very thing that not only has been in the pipeline for some time now, but is also the one thing that all left-wing wankers seem to make their number one policy whenever they get the chance to. It's like all their Christmases have come at once. It's almost as if they're being rewarded for their failures, as it was them and previous governments before them that sat on their hands and allowed these population issues to worsen. They've sat idly by, allowing this problem to fester, and they have no intention of reversing the trends. They have no intention of referring to native births, no intention to anything of the sort. Speaking ahead of a Parliament debate on migration on Tuesday, Fiona Hislop said that the UK government's wider proposals for a migration system would be disastrous for Scotland, particularly for sectors integral to our economy. Given our declining birth rate, all of Scotland's population growth for the next 25 years is projected to come from migration, but the UK government's proposals to end free movement of people and set arbitrary migration targets presents a real risk. I mean, look at all the years that the SNP have been in charge. They've had the ability to attract European immigration. They've had all this time. So either it's merely that Scotland currently isn't an attractive destination in comparison to others, or they just never bothered their arse. Not forgetting, of course, the 3 other countries within the UK, for them, they could have turned to also. How could projections, on a side note, show all of our population's growth to come from migration for the next 25 years when they haven't even got control over immigration? Granted, as previously stated, they've got current freedom of movement from Europe and the UK, but until the powers are devolved, and or if Brexit does indeed happen, the immigration to Scotland will be reduced somewhat, which is the main reason they're shouting for immigration powers to be devolved. So, from where I'm sat, it seems that these projections have been calculated with certain variables presumed to be incorporated already, meaning in this case devolved immigration powers, and it's these projections that are built on the back of a presumptuous hypothesis that all of a sudden are our targets that we need to meet, because all of a sudden these projections show our population growth is going to come from one particular area. That's where we need to put all of our focus and priority into. It is clearly by the day that Scotland urgently needs a migration policy tailored to our distinct needs. Our distinct needs, yes. The progressive gurus in Hollywood are hell-bent on having their migration policies, and we all know that a migration policy tailored to their distinct needs is very different from rational thinking people, whether or not they're pro-migration or not. There's a big difference between being pro or anti-migration and that of a progressive guru's interpretation of migration. The population stands at an all-time high, but statistics from the National Records of Scotland show the spring birth rate has fallen to its lowest level since records began. And what have they done? What do they plan to do? Questions that I keep raising, questions that sadly show that the government do not give a fuck about the people of Scotland. They don't give a fuck about us, they don't give a fuck about you nor me. What they do care about is imposing mass migration on the public. And they're duping the public into thinking that they're simply trying to retain freedom of movement within the European Union post-Brexit. Now granted, I doubt Brexit's going to happen, but whether it does or not, the fabricated climate crisis and the climate refugees / migrants en masse has the SNP salivating. In March this year, a report from the Independent Expert Advisory Group set up by the government warned UK immigration plans could reduce migration by up to 50% in Scotland. So why don't you incentivise native births? Why haven't they done that? For all the years they've been in power, why haven't they tried? Not even pretended to try. They just pretend that native births are completely and utterly out of the question. Or that's the way it appears anyway. And as I said, and as I will keep saying, all the years that they've been in charge, they have had freedom of movement within the European Union as well as the UK for them to exploit and do what they wanted with. So the only difference between now and granting them the rights to immigration and devolved powers in that sector will be that they will be able to go further afield. They will be able to attract the migration from Africa. They will be able to go after their humanitarian duties, live up to the responsibilities, meet their targets as well as their obligations on a human rights basis.